Welcome to Mysterious Universe, Season 31, Episode 16. Coming up on this show, we've got the Great Crop Circle hoax, interfacing with the other, and the initiation of the Tengu. I'm your host, Benjamin Grundy. Joining me is Aaron Wright.
Oh, the Tengu. Aren't they these mountain-dwelling yokai-type creatures?
Yeah,
or
the
kami creatures?
mountain gods or the mountain demons.
They're the ones with the long noses and red
there's
skin.
those famous depictions of them where they have claws and they have wings and they fly through the mountains and whisk you away into the spirit world. I've got a confession to make. On this episode, I used an external research professor.
Blasphemy. How dare you? I spent all week working on this and you just go out and do external research.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how to kind of lighten the research load because we're on the verge of burnout every single week because we read like 1,000 books every week.
Speak for yourself.
So I thought, why not reach out? And I hired someone and I gave them a task. I said, give me a show about Japanese folklore. Give me something cool about Japanese folklore. And it's funny because we were just talking about kamikakushi.
Yes, yeah.
And he delivered it yesterday. He sent me this huge bunch of research on kamikakushi, spirited away. This concept that is very similar to missing 411.
Oh, absolutely. The parallels are just stunning.
The phenomenon that David Paulides has been researching with his excellent books for years. The idea that people just vanish in mysterious circumstances, often into the wilderness. And there are the rare cases where especially young children are found. They're found again, but the locations where they're found are often impossible for them to have reached by conventional means. So
mountaintops and, strange ravines and locations like up trees.
Yeah, so for example, there'll be a toddler, 3 years old, who will go missing for hours and everyone will search for him. There'll be search and rescue going all over the area, all through the wilderness looking for him, sniffer dogs, the whole deal. And when, in the fortunate cases, when they are found, yeah, like you said, they're kilometers, miles away, up steep terrain.
Well, also, they should be suffering from exposure because of the cool climates they're usually in. And they're in alpine climates, they're in forested climates, and they're fine. They're fine. They don't have a lowered temperature. They don't seem to have cuts and scrapes across their body where they've gone through thick brush. It's just inexplicable.
Yeah, and there's those cases in Japan from the folklore, although they're not technically considered folklore, where it's a very similar thing, where a young child will go missing from the village. Everyone searches for them. They're gone for hours and hours and hours, sometimes days, and then they're just found, sometimes where the searchers have
previously
covered
missing 411
multiple times. And we've covered this on previous shows in the past. I think it's been about 4 or 5 years since we've spoken about the Japanese cases. But it was great to see this external research come in and just, especially when we had just mentioned it, just refresh all these amazing similarities between missing 411 and this strange folklore in Japan.
And what you were telling me today as well, it's from a very new angle.
Well, there was this source of a boy who was taken away by a master.
Oh.
You might remember this story from years ago. It's a story of a young boy. He was, I think, early teens, 13 or 14. And he went to one of the local shrines one day and he saw this strange, mysterious old man standing outside the shrine trying to sell herbal pills. He was like a mountain herbalist and he was trying to sell his medicine. And this boy just found him so strange. He ended up watching him for hours. And at the end of the day, this strange old man with like long white hair and weird robes, he had this pot that had all his medicine in it.
Yes.
He would put the pot on the ground and then the pot would expand and he would get inside it and it would take off like a UFO. And this boy, he watched this, he claimed, on several afternoons when no one else was watching. This man would step inside this weird mystical pot and then fly away.
Even though it's not obviously Japanese, I've got the Monkey Magic song just playing now as he's climbing into it, flying off on a cloud.
Yeah. And it got to a point where, thrown forward by his curiosity, the boy approached this old man towards the end of the day. And the old man said, well, why don't you come with me? I'll show you amazing things. And it's got this real kind of creepy, like, kids getting lured with candy into a band story.
I think of it's more along the lines of Back to the Future. Like a crazy wild-eyed mentor and this, young guy.
It is a little bit like that, except for the fact that this strange old man literally lured the kid into the giant teapot with like little Japanese candies, and he got taken to the mountains and he came back with this incredible story. Now, there was a Japanese Shinto scholar that learned of this story and sat down with this young boy and recorded everything he had to say about his time in what was essentially another dimension, another world with this strange spiritual master. And I had never found the Japanese to English translation. In fact, I don't even know if there is one, but there is a paperback book it's a very scholarly book, and it's a academic's commentary on the Japanese source.
So they've translated it.
They must have translated it. But I found that today and pulled out all the excerpts. And that all came from the lead I got from hiring this researcher. So it's all coming up trumps.
All right.
That's coming up later on in the show. What have you got coming up?
Crop circles.
Nice.
Crop circles, but not in the way that you would think, because I was going down this path and I had this show planned out and I knew what I was going to do. And at the very end of yesterday, I just happened to come across this little story. It's only 2 or 3 paragraphs. It wasn't very long. I couldn't find a source. So I know people are like, a source, but I couldn't find a source for it. I couldn't find any details about it. But it rung a bell for me. I'm like, this sounds very familiar to a character that we already know of in the crop circle field, right? So the story is that there was this young kid, when I say young kid, 19, 20-year-old boy.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, over the years, he had developed an understanding of where a crop circle was going to appear. Like he just knew where.
How?
It just like got a feeling. It was like this emotion that overcame him. There was almost this, and keep this in mind, right? There was almost this compulsion that came over him that wasn't necessarily a possession, but caused him to kind of go into this automated mode where he would just get up out of bed in the middle of the night. He'd go wandering down the stairs. He'd go out into the cold because it was freezing. He'd walk through the snow. And he would find that there would be snow circles or crop circles, right? And that was a clue for me. I'm like, snow circles. So later on in the summer, of course, he goes out to where this crop circle is going to be. But there's always been this strange element of this influence. So he goes out to the crop circle, and when he goes to the crop circle, it's all of a sudden like this whoomp in front of him. Like the entire night sky lights up. There's this flash of bright white light.
Is there an object, or it's just...
There's nothing. There's nothing there, right? But he just sees this flash of bright, and it's so bright that it causes him to kind of reel back and cover his eyes, and he goes, and lies down. And when he gets up, he says he recalls right before the flash, there was like this lightning bolt that kind of shot down into the ground, like into the middle, which ended up being the middle of the circle, because once the light clears and he can kind of adjust to the darkness, there was obviously still moonlight. He could see that there was a crop circle before him, this elaborate crop circle. Geometric shape and different styles. We don't know exactly what it is. It was described as being geometric. But you can imagine, these crop circles have become very elaborate, especially in the UK, and we'll go into some of those in a moment. But standing in the middle of the crop circle is a monk.
What?
Like a monk. A physical monk in a cowled kind of black caped outfit.
This is literally Terminator 2.
I know, all right? So he's just standing. No, well, he'd be naked if it was Terminator 2. So he's standing in the middle of the field, but even though he's physical to this guy, he's not really physical. Like he's not there. But basically this guy, this monk, attaches to him, not directly. It's not that he actually attached, but it kind of jumps onto him. And then this kid goes home.
Like a spirit attachment.
Like it's spirit attachment in a way, but it's not like directly attached to him, but it's like hanging around him. And his house is filled with poltergeist activity. And his mother's like, what's this strange man standing in the house? And then she'll approach it and it disappears and all this strange activity goes on.
Bizarre.
So I'm like, this is weird. Like, this is really weird. And surely you're right. I was thinking, this sounds like, aside from just being some story that's been made up.
Surely you didn't find more stories of people being teleported down a thunderstorm into a crop circle.
I didn't, but I think I know who it is.
You think you know who the monk is?
I think I know who the boy is, the young boy is who's had the experience. It's Robert van der Broeke. So Robert van der Broeken, I'm not exactly sure.
Why does that ring a bell?
So this guy has been associated with BLT Research, not Blanket Lettuce and Tomato, but of course it's the group that bltresearch.com. You've got Nancy Talbot, and they're leaders in one side of the field of what's going on amongst crop circle researchers. And what I rapidly realized when I started digging into some of his stuff, because we know his story, and I'll play some video in a moment that kind of just describes his story and sums up what happened to him. But I started digging around, right? And I was thinking, the snow circles, I know this. He was one of the people who was instrumental in claiming that he was having encounters with snow circles. So if you just bring up some of these images that I've included here, Ben, let me just bring up this. So this is
Snow circles.
This is a snow circle that occurred on December the 17th in 2009.
For those listening, it is exactly what you would imagine.
It's exactly what you would imagine.
It's a crop circle in the snow.
Now, all of this stuff, these videos, obviously, which I've cut up and included the audio, which we're going to play in a moment, but the photographs, I'll link to all of it in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, we will describe it, but go to the website and you'll be able to find the links to this sort of stuff.
No footprints anywhere, which is weird.
This is really important about this stuff, right? Because this guy is highly controversial in this field. He's highly controversial because it all started off rather still unusually, but it all started off in a fashion that you could consider to be rational, right? But then it's become more irrational as the years have gone past. And he's been obviously very controversial in the field because researchers say the guy's making it up. Like, none of this can be real.
It's all hoaxed.
It's all hoaxed, right? But some of these things...
Like the rest of crop circles.
No, well, I'm glad you said that because the title of this show is going to be The Great Crop Circle Hoax.
Ooh.
And so when you look at crop circle, and we'll come back to our friend Robert in a moment. You're right, it is kind of blasphemy because the problem is that people want crop circles, and we assign this to a lot of paranormal phenomena, right? But we want crop circles to be something exotic. We don't want it to be a couple of old drunks that are getting around in a field. And that, of course, was the two guys in 1991. They were Doug and Dave in 1991. These were two elderly men that claimed that they were creating crop circles amongst the UK.
I know it's obligatory that you have to bring them up when you're talking about crop circles, but honestly.
Oh, of course. Yeah, look, it's important to raise this, right? Because even though it's a controversial issue, it's kind of accepted that crop circles, probably about 80% of them, are man-made.
According to who?
Well, researchers in the field, people that are looking into this. So you got people like Colin Andrews. He's a rather controversial figure. He's considered to be more negative when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Okay.
He's often fighting with Robert, Nancy Talbot, other people in this field. This comes up quite a lot. But when you look at these snow circles, you're totally right, Ben. There's nothing there. There's no footprints. There's no marks in the ground, but there's clearly the marks of the circles. So what's created? Like, bring up the second image for me, please, Ben. So this is the second image that's included on Robert's website. And this is important because this is actually a close-up, and it's showing one of these circles very close to the ground. The photograph angle is very close to the ground. And you can see as well with this, again, the snow is not piled up. There's around the edges. If heat was applied, you would have some melting going on, but there's no melting occurring. And there's no footprints coming into this ring at all.
Couldn't you just stand inside the circle and shuffle in the snow to create the circle?
On that particular image, there's a potential that you could, right? Maybe you could, but then when you look at the first image, you can see that...
I mean, how wide are those circles?
I don't know.
Could I go single file in there?
In fact, they are 60 centimeters by... Sorry. The whole length of it is 60 meters by 52 meters.
Yeah, we need to know the thickness of the perimeter.
Look, I would say that's about the width of a tire, a standard tire. So you are right. You potentially could, jump from one to the next. And of course, the reason why this guy is so controversial is because outside of his relatively normal experiences, later on in his life or his career, I suppose, this is what some of the skeptics claim. They say that, well, he's making a lot of this stuff up is because people, because they want to believe, they believe the most outrageous of stories that come about. And of course, there is one that comes from a recent story here. This was actually reported by, I think this is Brent Swanser. Yeah, so I'll link to this as well. Brent Swanser just included this short story about Robert, where Robert claims that he was investigating a crop circle in the area of Zevenbergen. And he got contacted by a friend called Roy. And they were talking about the experiences they'd had about having a sensation of going to this crop circle. But not only that, of when they went to the crop circle, being watched, like there was something there. Now, Robert, this is why I thought this first story I heard, I wonder if it's originated from Robert. Because in this particular report where we do know he's claiming this, Robert says he felt that his mind was invaded by a sudden, very vivid image of an octopus-like creature, right? So at the time, he was puzzled by this, but in the coming days, things became extremely unusual for him because as soon as he got home, he was once again overcome with this irresistible urge to venture out to a grassy field near Seppen Airport. Now, he claims that he went out to this field. So it sounds like the first story. So I'm like, it must be a claim that he's made. So he goes out to this airport and he says that when he got there was an egg-shaped craft that was emanating a golden light just hovering in the field. As he watched the strange UFO with awe, the bottom opened and from it came two creatures that looked like slithering things that he had seen in his vision. They were described as being slippery, reptilian-looking, pear-shaped heads, almond-shaped eyes with numerous tentacles sprouting from their chests and backs.
So they're like greys with tentacles.
Yeah, right? Now he says they gave out a telepathic signal that seemed to be benign in nature, and they allowed Robert to get close enough to touch their tentacles where things became even more deeply odd. I'm like, oh, you're touching Grey's tentacles? It's already at the upper limit of odd, but we do go deeper. Apparently, as soon as he made contact with the wet, slimy skin, he says he was jolted by a shock that was accompanied by an urgent telepathic message from the creatures proclaiming that Robert was meant to be a bridge between humans and them. All right, so I'm like, this is like contactee kind of stuff. He said both creatures were then enveloped by some sort of electrical tornado, causing them to spin around rapidly, scattering their tentacles.
Did they try and create a hybrid with him?
Well, maybe that was the touching of the tentacles.
Did they extract his genetic information?
Well, none of that's included, but who knows what's going on here. So apparently, telepathically, he asked them if they were okay. They assured him that they were, climbed back in the craft and flew off, leaving their tentacles behind.
What? Leaving their tentacles behind?
Leaving their tentacles behind.
Why?
He picked up the detached tentacles. I almost said testicles. That was almost there. He then claims that once he gathered them up, he kept them frozen.
I think I've seen this Korean movie. Then he just ate it raw. I've seen this one.
No, he kept them frozen, awaiting analysis for public release. Now, whatever's happened to that, I don't know.
Kept them for analysis.
Yeah, I'm like, did he? Right. So this is why this guy is clearly very controversial in this field. And so I had to dig a little bit deeper. And there is this division that occurred. So 2009 was where those snow circles were seen. His experiences go back much earlier than that, like when he was a teenager. But in 2012, Nancy Talbot describes this SOS experience that he underwent. So basically, Colin Andrews has been publicly expressing increasing negativity and animosity towards crop circle enthusiasts. And I almost think rightly so, right? Because if it's true that 80% of circles are artificially or man-made, I shouldn't say artificially created, are man-made, you could be like, well, yeah, if everyone's looking for it to be aliens or some type of external non-human consciousness, you can see how people can kind of run away with the madness. Like they get swept up in the vigor and the excitement of this being something that it's really not. That's not to say that we should ignore the 20% of the phenomena and look into that.
Well, even if a crop circle is man-made, that doesn't mean it's not incredibly fascinating. One of the recent ones I covered, in the last couple of years that comes to mind is this one. It was from Jerry Croth.
Oh, yes.
Messages from the Gods. Now, let me refresh your memory on this. We covered it on 26-23, so that's back in December 2021.
Is this a perfect example of take your meds?
Well, he was talking about this Wollaston Grange circle. You might remember this. It's on the screen there. But this appeared in a field just outside of an aging nuclear reactor in the UK. And through his analysis of this circle, he realized that it was pointing out several elements that were associated with the nuclear fission, and specifically with how it's done at this aging nuclear power plant. And I won't go into all the details, but basically he realized that this circle was essentially saying there's going to be a problem and this reactor is going to have a serious incident. Now, this circle appeared in this field. From memory, it was about 30 days before that aging nuclear reactor had a serious problem and was shut down.
Yep. So
now, that was incredible. So yeah, you can say that's some kind of non-human intelligence trying to warn us, or it could be something else. It could be someone involved in some particular level with the nuclear power plant who's like, how do I get the information out?
Yeah.
I know, a really cryptic crop circle.
Look, you know what?
But I doubt it. That's why I think it is non-human, because it is so cryptic and weird.
You know what? You're on the right path with the direction I'm going to take on this episode, but you're not quite there. But I think you're onto something, right?
Well, obviously I'm missing the tentacles.
Well, you are missing the tentacles. You're absolutely right. No, there's no tentacles involved in this one. But what possibly could have occurred there, right, is that because when crop circles first started, and you have people like Jenny Randalls that were looking into it, you've got Linda Moulton Howe, wrote a fantastic book, describing the stuff that's associated with crop circles, especially from when they really took off in the late 80s, early 90s. That's when there was an explosion of this phenomena. But the reality is, like very early on in that scene, most crop circles were very rudimentary.
Yep.
Like they were very reductive. They were just kind of a bunch of holes in the ground that didn't have tracks next to them.
They didn't have complexity.
They didn't have the complexity, right? And this is what has led some researchers to say, well, the complexity is coming about because you do have hoaxes. And there's plenty of people that have come forward that have said, look, we are hoaxes, and we're doing this to obviously get a bit of attention, get a bit high. But there's other people in the field, like Matthew Williams, for example. Matthew Williams is the only person that I'm aware of to date that has been charged with not making a crop circle, but I think it was criminal damage. He was charged with criminal damage and going to the farmer's field. And when you look at some of the old documentaries, and I'm going to play some videos of old documentaries today from the 90s. And these, and I'm not including it in this, but when you go through these documentaries, there's farmers that they speak to, and farmers are just ticked off. Like a bunch of people show up because it's not only the person coming into our field and causing our crops to be stepped on, it's also the fact that afterwards a bunch of people then show up and want photographs with the crop circles and want to do research, and it just disrupts our farming operations. So I get it from that perspective, right? That's really frustrating. But there's something odd that's going on here that, okay, in that example of the nuclear reactor, maybe there was someone that knew that there was a problem, or an intelligence that knew that there was a problem, but they somehow utilized the hoaxes to convey that information.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
And when you think about, and we're talking about, Robert, but there's other people that have described this, and this is where we'll come later on. We'll come back.
Like plant the seed of the design in a local hoaxer.
Yeah. So Matthew...
is there evidence for this?
Yes. Matthew Williams, the hoaxer that was charged with hoaxing crop circles. I've got an interview with him coming up in a moment where I've gone in and I've chopped it up. He did it back in 2009. He described something very strange, like he was being influenced by something to create certain crop circles. So it opens up the whole swathe of crop circle research, because you go, well, 80% of them are man-made. It's like, yeah, of course. Okay, fine. But it's man-made being directed by some consciousness, some non-human intelligence.
It does get to the real fundamental idea of what inspires someone to go out and create any kind of art or anything like that.
Absolutely.
And something like a crop circle,
it is.
But it also has severe risks. I mean, if you get caught, there's a financial penalty involved, and it's incredibly difficult to do.
Yep.
To be able to pull it off. Yep. So what is the motivation?
Well, there's certainly something more going on here. So I just want to mention this, and I'll include this photograph as well. Bring up for me, Ben. Actually, don't bring it up just yet, but I want you to bring up this image that's called the Joker, right? So I'll link to the full thing in the show notes so you can read the back and forward. And this is what I don't bother going into too much. It's a lot of he said, she said, like, let's bitch in the background about what we think about crop circles. But Nancy Talbot says, look, there's certainly a genuine circle phenomenon, because I have personally experienced repeatedly what appears to be a gentle spiritual presence as the source of the circles. Now, this is something that Linda Moulton Howe described as well. Like, she has gone to locations throughout the UK, specifically Wiltshire, I think, and she's even described in her book that when she walked into a specific crop circle at one point, she felt like a soft, gooey pressure kind of coming over the top of her, over her head and pushing into her back. And she described it feeling like when, I think someone said it was like when a Tesla coil is turned on, it creates this fluffy kind of jelly-like wall that you kind of walk into. And she said she felt this inside the crop circle.
I mentioned that recently with that woman that claims she found a Knights Templar cave in Brazil.
Yes.
Before she found the cave, she went to a circle and said she felt some kind of force field. As she went further into the circle.
And that's the thing, right? Because there's just so many things that occur within crop circles that aren't, like, even if it's a man-made one, this is the strange thing. You've got what is known to be a man-made crop circle, and yet strange phenomena occurs inside it or around it. Like, people start having like dreams about the symbols, and then they'll wake up and they'll find that in their local field there's been a crop circle that's being created by a hoaxer, and yet they've gotten the image in their mind. How is that possible? How does that happen? One of the wildest things comes from stories of people like Nick Redfern. Of course, Nick Redfern, being in the UK, and I think he's in the US now. But previously when he was in the UK, he's been boots on the ground talking to people that are associated with this kind of stuff. He describes that the peacock phenomenon of crop circles. And I'm like, I know I say jokingly that everyone's got a peacock story. Well, it turns out that every crop circle researcher probably has a peacock story. Because what he described, right, and this would actually make sense, much like what you were talking about in last week's episode about Cornwall, right, which is this location which is associated with strange phenomena, these occult groups that seemingly are summoning things.
Weird place, weird people.
there's a bunch of occultists throughout the UK that utilize crop circles and the creation of similar indentations and symbols in the ground and at certain locations to summon entities, right?
Really?
And guess
Doesn't
what?
surprise me, actually.
Well, but you know what? Guess what they're summoning? So near this crop circle, suddenly appeared and everyone was trying to understand. Apparently there was a group that was associated with it because Nick had gone into this crop circle. And when he walked into the crop circle, there were a bunch of peacock feathers everywhere. And he's like, what? Like, as if, it's strange. Like, why would a bunch of peacock feathers and laid out properly, like in a kind of a star kind of pattern?
Some kind of ritual.
Yeah, not scattered. And he ends up getting a contact. I believe her name was Jane. I don't know if that's a pseudonym. But she's like, oh, yeah, there's an occult group that practices within these circles to summon entities. And they want to summon Bigfoot-type creatures, Wolfman-type creatures, this kind of stuff, right? But sometimes there's this factor that it's got some weird kind of. And this is what always happens. It's like doing a deal with the devil. You never get what you actually bargain for. So around some of these circles, right, there's been phantom peacocks showing up. So there was this story of where people started running over peacocks. And what I mean is they were driving along, peacock goes in front of them, and there's feathers flying everywhere, and then it dematerialized.
And then there's no peacock.
Then there's no peacock. So lorry drivers,
you sure it's not stuck up under the fender?
No.
And after a couple of weeks, you start smelling it. And then you got to get up there with the pressure cleaner and hose it out a dead possum that totally never happened to me before.
No, it totally never happened to you before. No, they were reporting it, right? Because it was just so jarring, so shocking. And also, it's not like peacocks are just hanging around and people were running these things over.
Yeah, that's like an ornamental bird, right?
Yeah, of course. They're beautiful, apart from the noise they make. And so they were getting out of their cars shocked. And because they didn't find anything, they were reporting it to the police. They're just calling local police and saying, hey, I've just run over a peacock and it's potentially a hazard to the road because I had to slam on my brakes but there's nothing there. And of course you could be like, oh, well, whatever, that's a one-off. It kept on happening over and over and over near where a crop circle was. So was it that someone created a crop circle as some type of initiatory portal opener or something, and rather than getting a Bigfoot, although they pop up, right, you just got a bunch of spectral peacocks coming through.
Yeah, that's a hard bargain. You go in and try and summon some demon, and you just get a bunch of peacocks.
Which in itself could be considered demonic. I mean, if they're bothering you, and causing problems, well, maybe, right? But then at the same area, in these particular locations, then there are spectral Bigfoot sightings. Right. And you can't discount all the strangeness which is associated with these crop circles, right? There's a whole heap of reports out there. Many of them actually have come from Matthew Williams of describing people and Nick Redfern and other people in the field of people going into these circles and, funnily enough, encountering big black cats. Like big black cats is what people encounter. And what I don't mean as in like a big house cat. I'm talking about the red-eyed, large panther-like creatures that are spectral, that are clearly supernatural and not they shouldn't be in that location, but are appearing inside crop circles. Now, this hoaxer, Matthew said that there was one particular occasion where he went to this crop circle, and while he didn't see anything, he said that he'd created the circle, he was finishing up, and as he'd finished up, he heard this sound. There was this static kind of sound that's all around him. Like you could just feel it. It was in the, like it's this electrical kind of feeling. It started swelling inside his ears. He felt very uncomfortable. And that static turned into like growls of a jungle cat or of some type of large growling cat-like creature. And he noped it the hell out of there. Like he got the hell out of there.
And so how did he get the idea for the design?
So
those designs, they're done on a computer. They're done on computer software,
and
right?
Groups
they're
of them.
Elaborately mapped out, and then you go out there with your pins, and your strings, and you figure it all out, and then you start pushing down the grass or the wheat or the crop.
Yep.
So where did this come from?
Well, that's a good question, right? Where does it come from? Does it come from, because even when you're designing it, you've created it on a computer. Is that coming from, or you're even just drawing it, like you're drafting it. Is that coming from you? Or is it coming from something else? And that will become very apparent in a moment. But just before we move on, the last thing I mentioned about Robert, right, is this is where the weirdness kind of comes in. And I don't know what to make of this at all. I am leaning more towards the possibility that this guy, like the crop circle phenomena itself, it starts off as being strange. It's like an initiator, right? It starts off being weird and people flock to it and it gets more attention. But then people keep on hoaxing it and making more wild stories as they go along to keep the attention that comes with it. But then maybe not. Maybe there's something else to it, because Robert says that, well, and this was described by Nancy Talbot, Robert essentially had this feeling one day where he has this, it was 3:15 a.m., it was Friday the 13th of July in 2012, He contacted Nancy because he'd had an apparition event that had occurred in his home. And he says that when the static kind of feeling happened inside his head, he started to go dizzy and it was kind of like sitting down. And he said there was a presence that appeared in the room. And this presence, it was a couple of old dudes, right? And these guys were like, okay, you have to take photographs. You have to take photographs and you have to give this, you have to get the message through to Colin Andrews because he will see that this is all about love.
Wait, what was the presence?
Right. It was just like these couple of old men, but spirits.
So some old ghosts.
Some old ghosts, right? Somehow appeared.
How are they communicating with him?
I don't know, actually. I think it was in his head. It says here that he heard them clearly say in a voice, hello, Robert, right? And he includes photographs. Right? He's taking photographs in the room. And this is the photograph that he took. He says, both men gave explicit permission for Robert to take photographs and they urged him to immediately publish them along with their message to tell, Colin Andrews that he's being far too negative.
It looks like a mask from Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah. So this is an image that he captured. And he captures 3 of these images. This is the third one, but this is the laughing mask that appeared, right? And he says, when he saw these laughing Joker's masks appear on his camera, his heart was pounding and he did not understand why they were appearing or what they meant. Robert asked, it says in inverted commas, so maybe it's telepathically that this is happening. He asked what this was about. And they said, when people say and do negative or untruthful things, we all must remember to laugh. When we laugh and find things funny, light pours in and sadness and negativity disappears. So the whole point of this, right, these entities, was apparently to somehow stop Colin Andrews' negativity about crop circles. I'm like,
he's pretty positive about crop circles.
Good try with that. I'm not so sure that that's going to work. But let's jump forward, right? Let's go over to the stories of Matthew Williams. And I want to bring up the crop circle man. Now, there's apparently a documentary out there, but I couldn't find the actual documentary itself. It was like anything that's like Google or Amazon or whatever. I just couldn't access it. It's been removed in a lot of locations. But I did find an audiobook version of it where they've obviously taken the audio and done it. So I've clipped up this audio for you. I want to address straight away, Ben, the question you asked of where did these images, like where did the plans for these crop circles come from? And it comes about because we've got to remember, this guy is a hoaxer. His intention, it's all within him. There's nothing strange going on here. He's just simply going out into a field and creating images. Take a listen.
I believe in all this stuff, so I went into crop circles and I started having paranormal experiences happening to me on a grander scale, a much bigger scale than I'd ever had before in my life. I'll explain to you. I got a strong urge one night to go out and make a circle, and it was too late for me to get a team together. So I went and did this circle on my own. I actually got a tripod and used it as a person to hold the tape, in effect.
What, a camera tripod?
A camera tripod, quite a heavy one, and weighted it down. And I actually used that to scribe the circle myself and then scribe each part of the petals. Now, well, I actually heard people whilst I was making the circle. I thought I heard a guitar, and I thought I heard people chatting. So I knew there were people nearby. So I didn't obviously speak because I was on my own. And but I sought out the people that were there to find out their story of, well, did you hear anything? Did you see anything afterwards?
Could they not have seen you? I mean, how dark was it?
No. Well, we'll come to another story about why they couldn't have seen us in a minute. That's a very interesting one. But they said that they'd been meditating on this design, that nobody had been playing a guitar.
Well, they'd come up with this design themselves.
They were meditating on a 6-fold petal design, and I had come out of my house at 11 o'clock at night with an urge to come within about 150 feet of them and quietly make a circle on my own. That was the circle near Avebury, and it was something was being asked for.
So you independently of them came up with this idea of the 6-petaled flower in a circle?
Yeah.
So what came first, his idea for the design or the people out there meditating for it?
Well, when you're looking at it from his perspective, he just suddenly had a compulsion to get up in the night and go out and create a crop circle by himself. But it sounds like that this group was at this site meditating, asking for a crop circle to appear, right? Expecting it to be some type of alien or who knows what they were thinking, but certainly not a dude with a board and a rope in the middle of the night in a tripod to come out and like etch out this crop circle. But he did, and it was exactly the same image that they had asked for.
Maybe I have a misconception, but I thought that the planning of the design would take more time. Like I wouldn't think it would be something where you just wake up at, 10 o'clock at night or
Yeah.
in the middle of the night and you think, oh, I'm just going to go out and do it. You have to plan for it. You've
Usually it
got
does.
to lay it out in the software and you've got to. So did he have a design ready?
No, that's not. I think in this case, it's suggesting that he was under some type of control, that some force had stepped in and had put the image inside his mind and had caused him to do it. But you're right?
So who are these people meditating?
Just a bunch of people that like crop circles.
Is that what they said?
Well, that's what they said. I mean, when we start crossing back into if there were peacocks around, we know that it's this weird occult group, but that wasn't described. But I thought that to be fascinating because here is a guy who, and he describes it there, that he was fascinated with UFOs. Like he was already in this field, right? But he'd never really seen anything. He'd never done anything. The moment that he gets involved in crop circles, he has an explosion of experiences, which I'm going to play more for you. But what he says, though, is that sometimes you can go out and create a crop circle. And despite no matter how much meticulous planning you do and how many people you're with and you're all working together, sometimes mistakes are made, right?
Of course,
and it's really frustrating. But more often than not, you find that mistake is actually for a reason.
Well, how come we don't have more man-made attempts at crop circles where they have made a mistake and just given up? Why isn't there more half-finished crop circles?
That's actually a good point. He does say that you can fill them in and you can kind of like cover up over where you've made a mistake and that kind of thing. But in saying that, he describes a mistake that he had in one particular evening creating a crop circle, but it pointed to something important.
Are the mistakes even meant to be there? Because some people do believe that the mistakes were actually intentional in some respects. I mean, we had a crop circle we were making one night. We were going along and all of a sudden we came to the last part of the crop circle and all parts were identical. So we came to the sixth part. We'd done the 5 and the 5 arms were correct and the 6th one, we couldn't do it. And all of us just went, goo, goo, gaga, and we all just went, nobody could think. It was almost like something had sort of like slapped us and gone, you're not going to complete this. So we had to do something else on the fly to just complete it. But we'd actually scribed it in and then we just all went crazy, and we couldn't do it.
So when people, sort of the kind of people who go to crop circles after they've appeared, went to this crop circle where you'd all gone gaga, as you say, what did they say about this anomaly?
Well, it's interesting because without giving too much away, I mean, the feature that we put in place actually pointed towards another land feature that could have had significance towards that land feature. So the mistake was in the direction pointing at
a land
feature.
Chance?
Well, we were all just flummoxed. We couldn't continue.
So it's pointing at Stonehenge or something.
Yeah, a stone megalith, essentially, without them intending to do that. And then it was almost like it was forcibly directing them to point to that. But why? Why would the intelligence do that? But I wonder if it's being orchestrated in a way that draws attention to it, because what really comes across with these crop circles, whether they're apparently made by some type of non-human, in 20% of the time, a non-human force, or they're created by hoaxes with an influence of a non-human force, they seem to attract attention, like they're focusing people onto these things. And why is that? Like, no one's entirely sure. But what he quickly found out as well, being a crop circle hoaxer, you kind of come to the conclusion, look, it's all a hoax, like I'm just hoaxing it. But then there's this element that comes up, and there's the Oliver Castle video. In fact, let's just skip over to that for a second. You probably already know this imagery, but play video number 3 for me, Ben. This came up
classic.
This depicts a crop circle allegedly forming right before a videographer in 1996.
I can't remember. Was this ever debunked conclusively?
Not conclusively. It's been debunked, then it's been re-unbunked, and it's been, re-debunked, and it's again.
Did we examine the pixels?
No, we didn't examine the picture. But it came out in 1996. So there's a lot of stuff that, could potentially be going on. It's not like it is today where you really can quite easily use After Effects or whatever else to just create this kind of stuff. That's not to say that I don't necessarily believe that this couldn't be faked. But it adds to the strangeness, right? So if we come back, we'll go back and have a look at this audio here from Matthew. Matthew says that one time when he was creating crop circles, he was hoaxing them. He was chased away by balls of light.
Sometimes when you're meant to do things, you do them. And when you're meant to stop, you stop. And if you're not meant to do them, bad things happen, which is what happened on one night when we were going out and we tried to make a circle. It felt wrong. Everybody was making mistakes. We couldn't coordinate ourselves. And I said, no, we're going to do this. And we started doing it. 3 balls of light appeared at the corners of the field, and initially we all thought it was farmers with torches, and we ran. We met at a predefined point, got out of there, And we remember looking back, and as we were sort of running out of the field, these balls of light were sort of coming across the top of the crop in a very, very quiet fashion. They weren't sort of jumping around like torchlights would. Yeah, there wasn't like a torchlight going, beams across the crop. It was just balls of light that were moving across the crop into the position where we'd been. Now, subsequently, a big circle appeared in that field, which was spectacular and outshined what we were going to do.
Weird.
So he went into a field to hoax a circle, even though he got this feeling that that wasn't the right place to do it, because it's almost like he was painting on the canvas that had been reserved for this non-human intelligence, whatever it was. And he was chased away by orbs of light. And this is what Linda Moulton Howe's book focuses on. It's the light phenomena that's associated with this kind of stuff. And
what's this gentleman's name again?
This is Matthew Williams. So he's spoken with Nick Redfern. I'll link to some of his stuff on our site as well, but I'll also link to the full audio book of this. It's about an hour long that describes this. But I have plucked out more of the paranormal experiences that he's had with this, where it's almost like a non-human intelligence has facilitated him performing the hoaxes. So there's one particular event, we had a strange missing time experience. Can you play number 4 for me, please, Ben?
When I was looking for UFOs, I was sitting on hillsides waiting. I saw some things from time to time, but it's very fleeting. But when I started making crop circles, my paranormality, the things that were happening to me, went up.
But you've had, because we've obviously discussed this beforehand, you had lots of strange experiences.
Yes.
In the circles when you're making them.
Yes.
So perhaps you'd like to describe those.
So many to go through. I'll run across them very quickly. Time effects. We ask for a time check at 1 o'clock when we're in a circle. I get people saying, yeah, it's 1, oh yeah, 1:05. I'm thinking to myself, we haven't got enough time. So we carry on doing the circle for about approximately, I'd imagine, an hour. I look up in the sky, the sky is going red. So, it's getting, the sun is coming up, it's starting to become a little bit red. And I think, well, in an hour, we're going to be out of time. So I actually sort of look up at the sky and I say, God, I really, really need some more time. And then I say to people, what's the time? And everybody goes, well, it's 1 o'clock. I say, what? And somebody else goes, it can't be, because hang on, my watch is 1 o'clock as well. And I go, what? And then I look up at the sky, the clouds have come back across, which is where they were at 1 o'clock. And we carry on working till 2 on our watches again, and the sky comes to the red horizon and the clouds have gone across. So that's... And there was an observer there, a doctor, Dr. Simeon...
A real doctor this time?
A real doctor this time, yeah, Dr. Simeon Hine, who was there and witnessed this, and he was very impressed. He said, well, this is kind of, interesting. This is a sociological, paranormal phenomena. Can these things manifest because people ask for things?
Yes. I mean, it's missing time. You've had a time distortion that's occurred while you're standing inside a crop circle. And you can hear him there. Like, it does take a long time to create these things. And it's almost like a military operation that they're like calling time because I know that they've got to get in the darkness and they've got to get this crop circle created and get the hell out of there. And you've got to do it in a fashion that you're not caught by the farmers. But there's also other times of where, well, look, what if you go into a field and there's already people sitting there looking, right? And of course, sometimes there's people that are waiting for crop circles to appear and they're trying to capture it on film. So there are fellow, friendly people there, but there's also other times where it's just a bunch of people that want to get away from the city lights so they can do starlight observation or, using a telescope. That's exactly what happened to him. This is one evening where he wanted to go and create a crop circle, but there were a bunch of people there looking through a telescope, so he couldn't create it. Or could he?
It's about this intent, whether you're meant to make a circle or you're not meant to make a circle. On a particular night, we knew that people were inside a field watching the sky with a telescope. We knew they were there, and I said, well, we can't go in that field because there's people there, they're going to see us, so we can't work that close to them. And I just got this feeling that it was okay to do it. So I went into the field with a friend.
Just the two of you?
Well, there were 3 of us, actually, and one of them's probably watching the programme now, so hello. He and my friend sort of waited there whilst I walked up to the top of the field and went through where these people were with a telescope. I wanted to see, could they see us? And I walked through, and lo and behold, they could see us down in that part of the field. If we were going to do it, they'd see us. No way we could get away with this. So I went down and I said, look, they can see where we are. This is crazy. Shall we do it? And I got this feeling, yes, let's do it. And they said, yeah, we feel like we're going to do it too. So we did the craziest thing you can imagine. We made a circle in front of a load of people that could see we were making the circle. But they didn't see us, we thought, because they didn't come in to stop us making the circle. So in the morning, I sought them out. I found out who these people were. I said, did you see or hear anything? They didn't know we were circle makers. And I said, did you see or hear anything last night in that circle that appeared up there that you were near? And they said, no, it's the maddest thing. We were there all night, and a fog bank came down over the field, and it was only in that area, and in the morning the fog raised, and there was a circle there.
What the hell's going on with this guy?
Isn't it weird? And it starts me thinking about what we've described with some people before, is it the phenomenon that he's encountering, or is he actually now attracting the phenomenon, which is adding to him being able to do this under the cover of darkness?
I've just been doing a cursory search of the guy, and it appears that his life is paranormal investigation.
And it was before this.
Just a crop circle hoaxer.
No.
As kind of because you would suspect someone that does that is maybe a skeptic, and they just maybe want to do it as a bit of a
LARP sometimes.
Bit of a LARP.
Yep.
But no, if you do a search on the guy, he's investigating haunted houses and doing all sorts of paranormal stuff.
Yeah. But like I said, none of this really took off until he started doing crop circles. It's like the energy of the crop circle, whatever it is, has in a way acted as a gateway to this unexplained phenomenon. And it's not just him, right? So going back to that first audio I played where there was some group that was seemingly influencing him telepathically to create this specific design, right? That can happen to multiple groups, and they can all work together without even realizing they're working together. Listen to the next one.
If you feel inspired to do something, and if something feels like an exciting design, that's what you do. And people focus on ideas, and we share them amongst each other, and then the one that resonates the most, the one that creates the most excitement is the one we do. And we might take a piece out of one design and a piece out of another and put them together, and then people will say, well, that's the one we were meditating on. We were meditating on that. But of course, what they're actually meditating on is one person's come with one piece, another person's come with another piece, we've melded the two together, and that's what people were asking for. So that's kind of weird paranormal thing. Going into the same field on the same night as another team we didn't even know were in the same field, and working within about 200 feet of them. And in the morning we walk out of the field and there's another formation made by another team in the same field. They're both elongated designs, and one feature in one design seems to be pointing towards something in the other design.
That'd be funny if the designs interlock somehow or something like that.
Yeah, like they're linked to each other, but they're two separate groups that don't know what either of them is doing. But somehow they don't notice each other as well, moving about. I mean, I know they're vast fields, but surely you would see some movement. You'd know what's going on, but seemingly they had no idea that either of the other group was there. And that somehow they create a symbol. It shows you that there is something interacting with people's consciousness. And this is why he describes it. He uses the term, which we included in the headlines there, interfacing with the other. But what that other is, no one really knows.
I'm more interested in the motivation. What is the purpose for getting people to create these designs? If there is a non-human intelligence behind it, and it is acting in this way of this subtle, almost, sub-psyche influence, what is it getting out of it? What's the benefit?
Well, you actually almost hit the nail on the head before going back to this, that it's some type of communication. Like many people believe that are strongly connected to this and are true believers, that it's some type of communication between an all-knowing intelligence and humanity.
Then you go back to that old question of, well, why don't they just communicate it directly?
Because they can't.
Why does it have to be so cryptic?
Yeah, you're right. Because they can't. Because it's whatever. It's like us trying to communicate with ants, right? I have no way of communicating with ants. Like I can, direct their path. I can put sticks down to cause them to go a certain direction. I can pour water, but I can't do anything to directly communicate with an ant.
But that's not a perfect analogy. I get what you're saying, but we're talking about telepathic influence, right? So if you had telepathic influence, of course you could communicate with an ant. You could communicate ideas telepathically to an ant.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So why don't they communicate these ideas directly?
Well, one argument that I've heard, right, is because it is so foreign to humanity, whether or not we call it a non-human intelligence, right? So it could be extraterrestrial, it could be interdimensional, it could be because it's non-human. They can't communicate with us in a human way, even if using telepathy. So what they use is mathematics, right? And that's why so many apparently of these symbols, even the ones that are created by hoaxes, have these weird mathematical formulas or solutions in them that apparently some people have suggested in this field that that's the way they're communicating, using that universal language.
It does remind me of the substance of channel communication, though, because so much of it is
very much so.
Is meaningless fluff that has to be constantly interpreted for some kind of meaning.
Right.
In other words, it has no meaning.
And then we come back to Robert, who's been in the crop circle field for decades, spending 3 o'clock in the morning calling Nancy Talbot because he's taking photographs of a Joker mask.
Right. So I
Do you see?
I think there's a clue there as to why this information isn't clearly communicated. If it was clearly communicated, we could understand it, evaluate it, and that would be it. But because it is so cryptic, it's like a puzzle that needs to be solved. It sucks in the attention and the eyeballs,
which is what
and
it wants,
the conscious attention of all these people for essentially an unlimited amount of time. There's an unlimited amount of focus to be done on it because there is no information in there. There is no real wisdom in there.
Yeah.
The only exception, I think, like, I don't say that absolutely because, again, I really was convinced by some of the circles that Jerry Croth examined because of what you're talking about. They were linking to a nearby, for example, that nuclear power plant. Like, that was fascinating. And he seemed to have understood what was encoded in the circle. But it still comes back to that question of, why is it so cryptic? If the goal is to warn human beings about some impending nuclear meltdown, make it simpler. Make it understandable.
Hang on, that's a good point. But how would you inform people of that? See, the counter, and I'll just hold that thought before you answer that. The counter argument to and what you're saying, and that's where I've sat for a long time. That's kind of where I came today when I came to the photographs of the Joker, right?
Yeah.
I was like, this, and I'm like, oh, you're always talking about tricksters. It's like, because the phenomenon is tricking people.
Sorry.
Like, I'm sorry.
Sorry for being honest.
But that's what's going on, right? It's not, and a lot of the time it does come, I find, from people that are all like, oh, it's love and light, and like they really want to believe. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you're being consumed. You're being used as a food source for whatever this thing is to grab your attention. And that's all possible, like with this, right? That's all possible. The one counter argument that I think has got a lot of merit is that this is being done and conveyed in such a cryptic, difficult way because humanity or whoever is interpreting it has to reach a certain level of understanding, like to be worthy of understanding that knowledge.
Yeah, I get that point of view as well. I was just thinking about that. It's almost like a Zen koan or something where the meaning requires pondering and the meaning requires some kind of
meditation,
spiritual attainment to understand the deeper information that's being reflected in it. It's not something that can be understood on the surface. And I guess that's the whole point of the Western mystical tradition as well, is that, the idea behind alchemical teachings and those kind of Western mysteries is that only the initiated could understand them.
Yep.
For the uninitiated, it is completely obfuscated. Yep. It's completely impenetrable.
Yep.
So maybe crop circles is of the same ilk, where there is some kind of initiation that's required to understand that deeper meaning.
Yeah, I think the answer lies somewhere in between, right? I think that you potentially fall into this trap, and I'm not saying you, I think just in general, right? People in general. We fall into this trap of going, well, this explains this, and that explains that, and then that's it, right? It possibly could be a multitude of these things all combined together. So you've got people like Robert, where it does start off being kind of like trying to influence him, and then some entity comes in and goes, oh, I can pull him away. And that's the whole, and when you think about it, right? Well, I think about Eastern traditions, like mystical traditions. I'm not so much sure about the West, but although it happens there as well, like what happens in like meditation or trying to attain enlightenment? Even like when you're reaching enlightenment, there's that story about the monk that was like sitting there, pious and doing everything he could to attain enlightenment and giving up all earthbound attachments and everything. And right as he's about to get to enlightenment, he's like, oh my God, I'm going to be enlightened. And he ruined it.
And then he fell.
Then he fell. He ruined it, right? Maybe this is like a test. It's the same thing. It's a test. And you've got people like Robert. I'm not like using him. I'm not trying to brag on him, right? But he's starting to talk about stuff which becomes like octopuses spitting out tentacles and all this kind of stuff. It's like maybe he's been lured away by that test. Like it got him. Like maybe he was on a path to understand something of an enlightenment in regards to the information being given through, and he failed that test. And now he's just like warring with other crop circle researchers.
I do fall back on the idea that higher truths are simple and easy to understand. It's when things are of a lower order that they become complicated and hard to decipher.
Yeah, maybe, but it's almost like that bell curve, right? Where you got, that you see it like the memes, you got the real dummies that understand on one end, and then the super intelligent, and the rest of the normies just to like,
Well,
clue.
I would also say if there wasn't like spectral hounds and weird tentacled aliens appearing in these circles, then maybe I'd be more inclined to say, well, it's some kind of holy initiation into some kind of higher understanding.
Yeah.
But the phenomenon associated with it isn't necessarily of a higher order, is it?
And you know what as well? We're making the inference that it's trying to convey something which is good for humanity. Like it's trying to convey, like what if it's just simply these are portals? Like it's really simple. Like the crop circles are portals and maybe something on the other side, whether it's good or bad, I don't know, but it's trying to influence people so that they open up the portals. They open the door because the door, it's like a hotel room. It only opens from one side.
Maybe those peacocks were the scouts for some kind of
See?
a bird army.
Yeah.
And
Some
you
spectral
might
peacock
think
bird army.
I'm joking, but many Australian soldiers lost their lives to a horde of emus not too long ago. It was not too long ago.
That is true. That's why we have Anzac Day. Like, actually, that's terrible.
No, delete that. Delete that immediately.
So going back to this stuff, right? Going back to this, you're totally right, because then it becomes a little bit absurd, right? There's this audio that he comes up to next. He's like, oh, look, this is really profound. But when you're a broke-ass paranormal researcher...
Is there any other kind?
It's like the phenomenon interacts you at that level. Like, listen to this. Listen to number 7, please, Ben. Credit.
I lost my pager in a formation. I said, oh God, I've lost my pager. Can anybody help me out up there, please? You know, I've lost my pager. And I tried to ring it with my phone. I didn't have any credit. It wouldn't let me ring it. I asked for help. And then I was able to use my phone to ring that pager continuously until I found it in the circle. Once I'd found the pager, I walked to the car, tried ringing it again. My phone wouldn't allow me to do it because I didn't have credit.
Oh, God. The old paranormal researcher on his last legs.
His bare ass.
How many times have we seen this scenario?
Asking for the cosmic cash machine in a crop circle to give you faux credit so you can find your page.
Aaron, can I get an advance on my MU paycheck? I need money for the bus. Ring a bell.
We have had a staff member that has done that. So anyway, the last thing that I want to mention, okay, so the last thing of his audio that I want to mention, you know, that lightheartedness aside, it really just emphasizes how I think that there is something else which is deliberately assisting him in forming these crop circles. We can only speculate and ponder as to why, but the empirical evidence here is his experience, and his experience is that something is affecting his surroundings to allow him to create these crop circles. So play number 6 for me, please. 8, sorry, please, Ben.
It was raining one night, and I was feeling a bit miserable. I sort of went, God, I wish it could stop raining. And then it stopped raining, and an oval shape appeared in the cloud, and I went, ooh. Okay,
what's
that
an
about?
Oval circle?
No, it was a circle, but an oval appeared in the cloud, like an ellipse, like an eye or something like that. And then I walked outside the circle, it was raining, walked back in, and it wasn't raining. And I told other people, I said, look at this. And they came out, and we all went, okay, because we believe in this stuff, We all went like, well, that's okay, that's really good. We're being told you're doing the right thing, carry on.
So it was somehow... Like the inference here is that there was some craft that was hovering above him that was protecting him from the rain. And the reason why I say that is because when you dig through the works of people like Linda Moulton Howe, she's got reports of people encountering orbs over crop circles, but when you look up into the sky, there's a triangular-shaped craft which is associated with it. It seems like in this particular case, he was in the rain and he didn't really want to create a crop circle. And it would be hard, right? It's already hard enough, moving through a field, let alone when it's wet and in the mud. But it was somehow stopping it from raining where he was. But if you step back, you'd be in the rain. I don't know. I don't know what these things are doing. I'll link to the entirety of that audio in the show notes so you can go and listen to it. It's the first half of the audio that's included there. But speaking of researchers that have had odd experience with this, what he's describing echoes an experience by Robbie Graham. Now, Robbie Graham has written for us over the years. Sadly, he's passed away now. But he was a lifelong UFO researcher. Like he's always had an interest in UFOs. But he even points out in an article that he wrote for us that, look, I've never personally set foot in or even seen a real crop formation, even though he lived in the UK, right? And he says, look, every summer a clear majority of them would appear in the the fields of southwest England, particularly Wiltshire. We know that, like Wiltshire is a hotbed. It's a mecca for crop circle enthusiasts to go and see these things. The entire area is steeped in myth and legend, he writes, but rarely do they show up outside the region. But skip forward. And I should point out, right, crop circles appear everywhere, globally, right? They do appear everywhere. They're less recognized because they tend to be less elaborate because there's less what appears to be hoaxing going on. But you've got like the saucer circles that have appeared here in Queensland. You've got crop circles in the 90s that were appearing in rice paddies in Japan. They've appeared in Pakistan, Germany, Switzerland, in the snow. Like these things are a global kind of phenomenon. But skip forward to 2016, and Robbie writes that I was in southeast of England, not too far from London. I was about 100 miles away from all the crop circle action in the southwest. And he thought, for whatever reason, like he had this impression, he's like, I'm going to make the cross-country journey to Wiltshire and be a part of this pilgrimage. Like, I'm going to go and see it. So he's like, put this intention out. He says, I didn't believe that these impressive formations were the work of extraterrestrials. It's well documented that they can quite easily be produced by humans. Although he does point out that for years, witnesses have reported orbs and other anomalous lights near crop formations, and many crop circle makers themselves have claimed to have felt physically compelled during the design and creation process of these elaborate works, like what we just heard there from Matthew. So this kind of weirdness does go hand in hand with crop circles, whether they're somehow created by a non-human intelligence or they're hoaxed. In any case, he said, being a UFO enthusiast, I thought that I would go down and check out these crop circles. But in May of the same year, he had apparently expressed on Facebook his desire to visit a crop circle that summer, and he'd forgotten all about it, right? It was until like 2 months later, in the afternoon of July 2016, he was scrolling the internet, and he saw a report that caused his jaw to drop. He said he realized that a crop circle had appeared 1 day prior, not half a mile from his front door. This incredible, elaborate crop circle. Bring it up, Ben. Image number 4. If you just bring it up in the show, in the image here, I'll put this in the show notes as well. I'll link to it.
Oh, this is the one from earlier.
This is 2016. What this was, it's an alien, a grey alien face with a tribal headdress around it.
Looks
right?
like almost an Aztec,
Aztecian kind of
headdress.
Yeah, right. So he checked the map, he surveyed the surrounding farmland, and he realized that, this was an incredibly close crop circle to his house. It literally could not have been more convenient for me.
If you were going to say something was man-made, you would say that because it is so
man-made.
bleeding. Oh, okay. It is, yeah.
It's absolutely 100% man-made.
So
right?
bleedingly obvious.
But keep in your mind the idea that the hoaxing could be controlled by some type of intelligence.
And the fact it's just one of those things, a weird synchronicity that he's had
weird,
this thought, and then he influencing the circle
That's
maker?
right, exactly. I don't believe that Robbie Graham, even though he posted on Facebook that he'd had an interest to go, I don't think anyone really knew where he lived, and I don't think a bunch of crop circle researchers were going to go out of their way, or hoaxers go out of their way to find where he lives to put this crop circle half a mile from his house. But you know what comes up a lot in crop circle, even in research fields and even with hoaxes, is synchronicities. Like these really weird synchronicities seem to happen to people. So he's like, I done it at my front door. It's half a mile away. He says it was the hottest day that had been that year, but he didn't care. He ran most of the way. He was excited and nervous to see what he might find, considering it only appeared 24 hours earlier. He said, I might even be lucky enough to find the circle all by myself. And he was. He writes that the crop field was deserted. Not only that, I did not encounter a single person on my way there. Which, while he doesn't say it, that's a little bit odd.
That is pretty weird.
Well, like I take my dog for a walk, or my neighbor's dog for a walk, and I encounter people all the time. Like I'm not in a busy street.
It's the English countryside.
There's people everywhere.
One side of it. But I read the other day that England is the most densely populated country across Europe.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Right. There you go.
By far.
Yeah. So he doesn't encounter a single person. And he said the woodland was very quiet. The field borders a busy road. Like you should see dog walkers and nothing, right? Which he doesn't read into it yet. And he doesn't even suggest anything. I will put my own spin on it in a moment, right? But he says,
Did he get raped by a peacock?
No, he ran into a peacock on the way through and it just dematerialized and just ignored it. But he wanders down into this and he finds a field, right? And he says it's behind a locked iron gate. It's this big iron farming gate. And he said, I climbed over the gate and cautiously made my way into the field because, he was concerned that there might be a farmer around and he really shouldn't be there, but he was so excited to go and see this crop circle. Whether or not it was hoaxed, it was still cool. He said, I stepped into it and it was finally achieving this lifelong dream of mine. Like I never doubted for a moment, he writes, that this crop circle, was man-made. But, I didn't feel any otherworldly sensations while inside it, but there was this increasing concern that a farmer might find me. So he's like, okay, I'm going to get out of here. He's snapped a couple of photographs with his phone. And And he bails out. So nothing that's unusual that other people report. Other people say they go into these crop circles. They have healing events taking place. These strange things happen. They get buzzing or ringing in their ears. They seemingly have missing time. They encounter balls of light, all this nothing, right? He says he runs out of the crop circle with this fear that a farmer's going to find him when all of a sudden it dissipates. It stops. And he's like, I stopped dead in my tracks, as if compelled to do so by some external thought.
Weird.
I instantly knew that I had to go back. I had to go back into the formation. So he does. He goes back into the formation. He lies down in the middle and he says, I look skywards and say aloud, thank you. I was not speaking to any space brothers who may have been watching from afar, but to the universe itself and the magic of its synchronistic symphonies. So he's starting to feel something, right? There's something that's going on. And he says, calmer now and still totally alone, I lay down there between the alien eyes and let my mind wander. Now, he points out that in the lead up to this experience, he'd spent about 12 months trying to work out what he wanted to do, and he was really interested in UFOs, but he says, I was questioning whether or not I'd been wasting my life in the pursuit of UFOs, and he'd reached this existential crossroad, and he thought that he was going to walk away from the UFO field altogether. And he was working on this, current book project, which was UFOs Reframing the Debate, which we had him on the show about. But he says, he wasn't ready to do that, and he wanted to get this sign from the universe that he was perhaps on the right path.
Well, he was doing a book for us at one stage, and he pulled out.
Yeah, but he had
maybe that's why.
He clearly had other issues going on. But I wonder, right? I wonder if engaging with the phenomenon, and now I know this, and we hear this so often that it consumes you. Right? It pulls you back in because he was about to leave, right? Not only the field, like symbolically, he was going to leave the field. Like, forgive the pun, right?
Yeah, the field of ufology.
And even it's like UFO circles talking about crop circle. Like, he was going to leave the field, and somehow he had this thought like come into his head that pulls him back in there. But this isn't the end of it. It becomes really, really weird. Okay, so he gets up, he starts wandering out of the field, and as he's walking out the field, he comes back to the gate. And when he comes back to this iron gate, which is big, like you could climb over it, he says he sees a male figure standing. He's like, I didn't see anyone else around. Like, there was no one else around. And he writes, as I got closer, I saw that he was looking directly at me, and around his neck hung what appeared to be an expensive camera with this like oddly large telephoto lens. Like, it was huge. It was just
comically large.
Comically large and off. Okay. But of course, he's like 30 meters away. He raises his arm as a gesture.
Why would you need such a large, high-focus lens when the view of the circle...
From over it, you take a drone.
It only works when you have an aerial view.
Right. So, well...
He's a bird watcher or something?
Maybe. So he's like, is it a farmer?
He's got a tentacle hanging out of his pants?
Yeah, he's got a tentacle like at his back.
Tentacle down his ankles?
He's like, was it a farmer? No. And given the camera, he was more likely to be a fellow crop circle hunter or perhaps even one of the circle makers. And I approached within a few feet and I could see him clearly now. His appearance was completely innocuous, apart from the massive lens, obviously. He was a medium height, wore glasses, a polo shirt, slacks, early 40s. Although he did appear to be of Indian or Pakistani heritage, but he had a perfect English accent. Like a perfect
That's
English
normal for
accent.
the UK.
Yeah, sure, right? And that's what he says. He's like, it's innocuous. Although I think about John Keel and how he describes the Orientals that he encountered and the reports of that. I'm like, maybe. And the reason why I say that it will become apparent when I describe the rest of this experience.
So he did have tentacles.
No, he says, look, without any prompting from me, he just the first thing this man says to him is, I'm just taking in the scenery. And Robbie says it immediately rang as false. His tone, his body language, something was not quite right. It was like he was making an excuse. There was something off about this guy. And I replied and I told him that there was a crop circle that was just further down the field. And naturally I assumed that he would jump at the chance to photograph it. He was like a Terminator. He just didn't understand. It was like he couldn't process what a crop circle was. And
What do you mean he couldn't process it?
He couldn't get it. It was like there was just nothing. He's like, he seemed, he writes, to be completely uninterested. Now Robbie climbs over the gate. And he says, oh, you just have to jump over the gate. And the guy walks up to the gate almost like he's about to walk through it. Robbie's like,
what is a gate?
Robbie says he doesn't know what a gate is.
Oh
and he turns to Robbie and he says, how do I get into the field?
Oh my God.
And this is a really...
Like butting into it like an NPC.
Yeah. This is a strange question, considering he also just watched me climb over the gate at that very moment. And he's like, you just climb over the gate, I replied.
What is climb?
Yeah. So he looked at the gate, clearly confused, before cautiously stepping onto the lower bar, and it was like he'd never climbed a gate before. He was unable to balance himself. He raised his camera up with one hand and slapped what appeared to be 3 continuous, completely random pictures of the general area, like he was pretending like he knew what he was doing. He climbed back down, and this is the really weird part, right? As if it doesn't get, it's already awkward.
We're firmly in Men in Black territory here.
Well, he turns to Robbie. And I don't know. Now, Robbie's been worried about getting caught by the farmer, about trespassing into someone's field. This guy looks him in the eye and says, I hope the police don't come. And Robbie writes, listen to this. Not 1 second later, a police car seemingly appeared out of nowhere, directly behind us, crossing my vision from left to right, down a narrow dirt track. Well, you wouldn't have. It's not like it's a road, even though there was a road further down. He was down this dirt track. And he's like, it wasn't more than 10 feet from me. And he freaked out because he's like, well, clearly the police are here for me because I've trespassed onto the property. But the guy just completely nothing. And the car, right, just kind of went past them. They didn't see any people inside it. It disappeared through a hedgerow and then it just was gone. And it's like, it was almost like, Robbie says, it almost magically manifested.
Like it's an illusion.
Then disappeared, like it was an illusion. Now, the guy didn't even bat an eyelid. And Robbie says, look, I'm feeling very unsettled at the moment. I said a quick goodbye to the man and headed swiftly back to the woods and into the trail that would lead me home. Now, he'd been walking for less than a minute when he noticed that the man was following him and gaining pace. Now, he walked and Robbie sped up and the guy sped up with him and he finally got alongside him, right? And the guy, like, he says, it's just the two of us in the woods with no sign of any other walkers anywhere.
That's the most awkward thing imaginable. Like if you keep walking and someone's behind you and they're getting closer and closer, eventually what you got to do is you just stop and wait for them to catch up.
Yeah. But I don't know what's going on here because Robbie says the guy just out of nowhere, he's like, Robbie's saying it was awkward. And the man just says, do you believe that there is life on other planets?
Oh, God.
And Robbie's like, sure. I mean, we're not alone. It's a pretty much a scientific consensus that maybe there's something out there, but there's a big difference, he says, between aliens being out there and down here. They're two very different, topics. But the man very rapidly replied. And he said, not only do I believe that there's life in the universe, because Robbie asked him the same question, I believe that other life forms are here now and interacting with us. And Robbie's like, what the hell? In fact, he even used like WTF. He's like, what the hell is this? Like, this is so strange. Now, he said everything is getting weirder and weirder. And the guy starts talking about life in the universe when all of a sudden he stops, right? He stops mid-sentence and totally flips out. Totally flips out. You know why he flipped out? Robbie said that as they were walking past, there was a spider's web with a leaf hanging in it, twirling in the wind, which is typical. You go into the woods, you see it.
Yeah.
It's a mundane sight for you or me or anything. This guy was like, what the hell is that? What is it? And he's like flipping out. He's like walking around it.
Okay, now I'm not in Men in Black territory. Now I'm in this is the most autistic Pakistani guy in England.
No. I'm still it's Men in Black. And Robbie's like, it's a leaf. You don't have to worry about this guy. Apparently started backing away until he knew he was a safe distance from it and didn't take his eyes off it. And Robbie's like, I cannot understand what I was seeing. I explained to him what it was, but he didn't understand. And he said, what's your name? And I told him. And he just simply responded that his name was Hassan or Hassan. He couldn't quite hear. He spoke very quietly. But they reached the crossroad and he just got the hell out of there. The man just kind of said, nice speaking to you. And he made this point of shaking his hand. And this is the Men in Black kind of thing. He's like, while he was flesh and blood, his grip was weak and strange.
He's borrowed some corpse.
Right. And now he says that this is the final thing. Now he kind of expected the guy to, like shimmer out of existence or be whisked away in a black Cadillac like we hear with many of these stories. He says none of that happened. He just kind of disappeared into the woods, which is odd as well, right? Like wasn't like he was going anywhere. He just went into the woods.
He didn't have a car waiting or anything.
But Robbie says, I looked down at my forearm and all the hairs were standing up as if electricity had shot through my entire body. It was like, it wasn't even a sense of anxiety or adrenaline. There was like, when he touched that guy's arm, it had shot something electrically into his body. And he said, I had to stand there until it kind of just dissipated from within him and he got home. Now, later on in the article, he goes into his, theories about what possibly happened and, how he doesn't really believe that it, could be anything, but it's strange, right? And and in light of what we hear about all these sorts of reports, it really is for this particular topic, kind of the cherry on the top for the high weirdness. It's not even high strangeness. It's the high weirdness which is associated with crop circle phenomena. It's almost like we attempt to categorize crop circles into being just one facet of the phenomenon, but it's almost like in some sense, this is a gateway for people experiencing other high strangeness, other weirdness, and it pulls people in. And maybe that's what this is about. It's like when a crop circle appears, it's not so much these days, but when crop circles were appearing in the 90s, they were appearing all across the television, all around the world. Like people were seeing this. What's it doing? It's generating huge amounts of attention. It's like people are focusing on it. So we come back to the idea is this some type of initiatory gateway for humanity? That people are connecting with it so that they can raise their vibrations or any of that garbage, right? Or is it just simply that it's some type of interdimensional or extraterrestrial force which is interacting with humanity, but it can only do so in certain ways? And to get the energy it requires, it does through attention.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something. That seems to be a key part of the whole process, especially the underlying pull on the consciousness it has with so many people.
It's really, really odd.
The fact that there is no answers.
No, there are no answers, right? And then, of course,
it's a puzzle without a solution.
Yeah,
it could be.
And that's the thing. And it keeps on creating this debate because you've got these people on both sides that are arguing with what's going on. And we're running a little bit long, but I just want to play this one video for you as well. So this is from Wiltshire in 2007, and this was actually caught on film. This was witnessed by, where is this? This is Gary King and Paula Jones. They were in Wiltshire, and they were with other people with cameras trying to capture a crop circle appearing in the field. Now, with hoaxes, as we learned earlier in the show, it does take them hours. They have to plan it out meticulously, and it takes a lot of time for them to get it right. Many people describe seeing crop circles that are there. There's nothing there as a field 1 second, and the next...
some great stories of people like falling asleep in their car, like staying up till 3 a.m. and they wake up 2 hours later when the sun comes up and there's a circle there.
It's like it knows how to interact with the consciousness. It's like it knows when it's being watched. It knows when people are around. And these elements, going back to Robbie's stories, are like it even clears the location for people. But just watch what happens in this video. This is play number 7 for me, please, Ben. We'll just finish up on this video. So this is Wiltshire, July the 7th, 2007. It's a view from Knapp Hill.
About 1:30 a.m. we arrived here on Knapp Hill to begin a night vigil overlooking Eastfield here in the background. When we got here, we met up with a cameraman called Wynne, who had a set of cameras set up here on the hill and also some cameras set up on his vehicle, which he'd brought through into the field down below. He showed us, when we got here, an image intensifier device that he had, and we scanned across the field. It was like looking at the field in sort of daylight, that it brought in more light. And we scanned across Eastfield and across the field of rape here and the Drovers Road and this field of wheat here, and we could see that there was no formations in the field at that time.
So this is showing the East Field, and there's nothing in the field.
Yeah, at night through a scope.
Yeah, 1:35 a.m.
Then we sat here just talking and overlooking the field until about 3 o'clock. Just after 3 o'clock, we had a big white flash of light that completely encompassed the landscape and the sky.
I got this on camera.
You can see the flash. Right, they don't see anything. They see a flash of light.
It was around that time that Wynne had to go down to his vehicle to change the tapes over. So he went down and done that and came back up to the hill. And at that point in the evening, it was completely dark. What we were looking down on was a completely black field. We couldn't see anything at that point. About 20 minutes after that, as some of the light began to creep in from the east over there, we started to see a shadow of what looked like some sort of formation down below, but it was still too imperceptible really for the naked eye to see.
I think this is actually the story I'm thinking about.
Well, what it ends up being is
and looked through his camera, which has an image-enhancing kind of capability. And through the lens of the camera, we could clearly see this formation that was laid out here in the field before us.
And it's an enormous multi-circle crop circle. Elaborate and absolutely huge.
So what was the time window for that to have formed?
Moments. It was a flash and moments. Like 3:13 or whatever it was, 3:30 something in the morning.
Doug and Dave.
Yeah. And
what if Doug and
Dave... It's a couple of elderly drunks from a local pub that are out there with a plank of wood and a couple of ropes.
Hear me out. Doug and Dave are actually ascended Tibetan masters who live in the Himalayas, and they just occasionally come down to Wiltshire and create these circles.
Look, after what we've described today, anything is possible. Anything like that is potentially plausible. I'll give you that one, Ben.
That's what I've got coming up in the Plus extension. We're going to be going into the phenomenon of spirited away. Many of you will know the famous Miyazaki film, one of the favorites, of course, Spirited Away. But this is actually based on a real phenomenon in Japan that has a lot of attention, very well known, and it's not considered technically folklore. You know why? Because folklore is all over the world, and specifically Japanese folklore as well, is always once upon a time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a legend, or there's no real attention paid on when and where. But with the kamikakushi phenomenon, the idea of being spirited away, someone taken into another realm where they can't be found by the rest of us, there's stories from the Japanese historical record that are, this happened.
Yeah, right.
August,
like it's readily believed.
1907,
Yeah.
with this person in this village. That makes it a whole other category. It is not folklore.
So it's historical events.
It's actual historical cases that are considered, assumed to be true by those who record them. So we're going to be going into that after the break. We're going to be looking at how that ties in with missing 411 phenomenon. I've got an amazing story of a young boy that was lured into a teapot with sweets and then taken to a mountain and tied to a tree. And, well, you can guess the rest.
Thank God it's coming up in Plus, I suppose.
He learned martial arts.
I assumed
learned martial
that.
arts.
No,
What
I assumed
Get
it was
your mind
karate
out
or
of-
something.
My gosh, disgusting mind. Disgusting mind. MysteriousUniverse.org/plus. Sign up today. You get access to the big extensions we do on these shows every single week. Plus members get the whole episode that comes out on Friday because we're only halfway done. And of course, on Tuesdays, Plus members get an entirely unique episode as well. Plus members get an extra season that's concurrently running with this one that goes up on YouTube and all the other usual places. Plus members also get a high-quality audio version of the show, a totally ad-free version of the show as well. And of course, if you sign up for our MU Max tier, you get access to our entire back catalogue going back 16, 17 years now. Check it out. Help support the favorite show, your favorite show, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. That's a wrap for this free edition of the show. Thanks for listening. If you're on Plus, stick around for the great stuff after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.